In this video, we have designed an experiment that will investigate the effects of different diets, specifically vegan, keto, and intermittent fasting, on blood glucose levels and other health indicators in patients diagnosed with metabolic syndrome. This video will include details about the study design, explanation into what our expected results should be and the theory behind these hypotheses, the explanation of the treatment imposed on the participants, and a summary of how the data will be analysed. To conduct this study, 100 participants with metabolic syndrome will first be randomly allocated a diet, with 20 individuals allocated to each group. The participants will then follow the allocated diet by observing the guidelines previously discussed for a total of 6 months. The purpose of this is to analyse the effect of diet on the blood glucose levels, weight, waist circumference, and categorical data describing a participant's mental well-being. The data will be collected after 2 weeks, 1, 3, and 6 months, which was selected to allow the study to not only analyse trends over time, but to also make adjustments to each individual's calorie intake and ensure the health of participants. At each time point, the quantitative data will be collected by calling participants into the lab for a fasting glucose test and for the measurements to be taken. During this, weight and waist circumference will be recorded by the same doctor, using the same scales and measuring tape each time, and the blood will be analysed using spectrophotometry to determine the glucose concentration. The categorical data will also be collected by asking the participants to complete a self-assessed survey, in which they'll be asked a variety of questions including their activity levels, sleep, and mental well-being. The significance of this questionnaire allows the study to consider other factors that may be affecting the data collected, such as exercise levels, as well as to observe how diet affects participants both mentally and physically. This may allow for future recommendations to individuals diagnosed with metabolic syndrome if the study produces positive results. To further ensure the validity of the experiment, participants are expected to accurately utilize a food diary. Each participant is to note down what they eat each day, the calories of each meal, and the nutrition breakdown. To assist participants, the food diary can be accessed on an app, which automatically calculates the calories and nutrition breakdown when a meal is input. In this app, they also have the option of sharing other health data, automatically tracked on phones, including step count and hours of sleep. This allows the monitoring of how accurately participants observe the diet guidelines, as well as to cross-reference data to the questionnaire to account for any outliers or unexpected results.
Okay, so starting off with our hypotheses, we'll be talking about the keto diet and its effects on glucose levels and weight loss. So, if an individual suffering from metabolic syndrome undergoes a keto diet for a prolonged period of time, they will produce the lowest blood glucose levels and have the second most weight loss out of all the diets chosen. Since dietary carbohydrates are the main source of glucose in the body, by removing carbohydrates, which is what keto does, the body will resort to a new method of energy generation. In this case, it would be ketogenesis, which is a metabolic process that converts fats into ketone bodies, and those ketone bodies become the main source of energy instead of glucose. Ketone bodies are converted into acetyl-CoA, which will enter the TCA cycle to produce ATP. Since the ketone bodies are synthesized from fats, the keto diet will encourage a high fat intake for this process to be sustainable and healthy. Additionally, since no carbohydrates are consumed and glucose is not synthesized as much, individuals undergoing the keto diet will have the lowest blood glucose levels and also have the second most weight loss out of all the diets because the fats are converted into ketone bodies to maintain ATP synthesis. Next up, we have veganism. So our hypothesis for this is that an individual suffering from metabolic syndrome maintains a vegan diet for 6 months or longer, there will be a small decrease in blood glucose levels, and it will be the least efficient method of weight loss. So this is because the vegan diet will encourage a high consumption of carbohydrates because it involves a lot of foods such as legumes, grains, and bread, resulting in a higher blood glucose levels than the other diets. Despite this, however, individuals on the vegan diet still have a slightly lower blood glucose levels than our control group. Since carbohydrates are consumed during the diet, glycolysis can continue regularly, and ketogenesis and gluconeogenesis are not as prevalent. Thus, unlike keto and intermittent fasting, which cause the body to rely on ketogenesis and or gluconeogenesis as the primary source of ATP synthesis, veganism will have the least impact on weight loss compared to these two diets. So, our last diet/lifestyle is intermittent fasting, and our hypothesis for that is that if someone undergoes intermittent fasting with metabolic syndrome, they will have the second lowest blood glucose levels and lose the most amount of weight. When fasting over a long period of time, blood glucose levels will gradually decrease as glycolysis occurs. Initially, glycogen will be converted into glucose to maintain glucose levels. However, once the glycogen storage has been depleted, the body will determine a new method of glucose generation. Gluconeogenesis is the pathway that is responsible for converting non-carbohydrate precursors like lactate and pyruvate into glucose. When undergoing intermittent fasting, the body has to rely on gluconeogenesis as the main source of glucose. Since this is the case, fatty acid oxidation becomes prevalent, which is the process that converts fatty acids into acetyl-CoA, which releases ATP. Since gluconeogenesis is an ATP-dependent process, these two processes must occur simultaneously with each other. Additionally, ketogenesis may also occur if the individual consumes a low-carb diet as well. Thus, due to all these processes occurring at once, intermittent fasting will most likely be the most efficient at weight loss. Likewise, as carbohydrate consumption is still permitted during eating period, blood glucose levels will likely be the second lowest, right behind keto. Lastly, this is just a nice recap of what we've just gone through, how we rank each diet in terms of their ability to encourage weight loss and reducing blood glucose levels.
Welcome to our group project diet guidelines part. In this video, we will look at the reasoning behind diet guidelines as well as the specifics of distinct diet categories, including their inclusions, exclusions, and recommendations. To begin, it is critical to understand why diet rules are so important. We frequently hear about trendy diets such as vegan, keto, and intermittent fasting, but assessing their effects on health markers can be difficult owing to a variety of factors. Aside from the precise meals ingested, those factors include portion size, meal scheduling, and more. To guarantee meaningful research, our dietary guidelines try to reduce these confounding variables. In our study, each diet group reflects a change in the certain factors to analyze their influence on the blood glucose levels. Now, let's delve into the specific of each diet group. And the first diet group is the vegan group. Participants receive daily energy requirements calculated individually based on gender, age, weight, and activity level. Updates occur if these factors change. The vegan diet excludes all animal products. The vegan groups was selected to represent the effect of excluding certain food groups from the diet, including main sources of protein and calcium. The keto diet is characterized by low carbohydrates and high fat consumption. It includes non-starch vegetables, low-carb dairy products, seafood, meat, and certain fats while excluding grains, sweets, and high-carb foods. Similarly, the keto groups also limited certain food groups from the diet. However, it is the only group to differ in the nutrition breakdown. As a result, this group provides a valuable comparison to the other groups as it demonstrates the effect of increasing fat intake and reducing carbohydrates intake. Then is intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting, especially the 16-8 method, places on restrictions on food types. Participants eat within an 8 hours window and fast for 16 hours. This allows the study to compare whether the change in the time frame of consumption may have an effect on health indicators in comparison to observing the standard 3 meals a day. Now, let's talking about the standard diet group. This group set as a control groups there, a standard healthy diet and no changing diet. Allow the study to compare the previously mentioned change in variables. This is because when comparing the control group to the diet guideline groups, all the variables remain the same except for one that is being changed. These standard recommended diets focus on balanced eating, including plenty of fruits, vegetables, and whole grains. It limits added sugars, salt, saturated and trans fats, and avoids processed and takeaway foods. Specific goals for daily servings and water intake are provided. Lastly, we have a group with no specific diet guidelines, but must stay with calorie recommendations. In conclusion, our diet guidelines are essential for our research, allowing us to compare the impact of changing specific variables on healthy indicators. As we continue our project, we will gather valuable insights into the effects of these diets.
During data analysis, several trends will be observed using graphical and numerical summaries. This includes comparing each diet and blood glucose levels, change in weight, and change in waist circumference, respectively. The use of changing allows to observe weight loss or weight gain, as well as muscle loss or muscle gain, allowing for comparison amongst participants of different weight groups. The mean and median of each dependent variable will be taken, as well as clustered histograms split by gender generated for a visual comparison. If the study observes significant differences between each diet group and the dependent variable, then this suggests that a change in diet does affect blood glucose levels. Whether we observe a positive or negative effect will provide evidence for future advice on the treatment of metabolic syndrome.